Charlie hat.
Oh, thank you.
That's just delightful.
I got it at a store.
Why is that something making you sad?
Like,
Did you think I thought you made it? It looks like it was bought at a store. I wasn't worried that you made it. It's just gorgeous. Making a good purchase is still an accomplishment in a capitalist society.
Yeah. It's either Spencer's Gifts or Hot Topic. I forget which.
Probably one of us, yeah.
And I like how it ties in with your shirt, too.
Thanks. I got it from my boss.
Cool. All right, well, I guess we're going to get started.
I'm pretty loud, though.
I'm hardly close to mine, and it's pretty loud, really picking up. But, all right, well, thank you for coming. This is our panel about Ty the Guy, Ty Templeton, one of my personal favorite writer and artists in comics, who's done stuff like the Batman Adventures, Batman 66, Bigg Time, an original graphic novel. What else? Justice League International.
Don't ask me to start listing my credits. I've been in this business 35 years. We'll be here all day.
But we are going to cover as much of your career as we possibly can.
Oh, God.
And hitting on some of the highlights, hopefully not too many of the lowlights.
Oh, let's start with the lowlights.
Oh, okay. Well, what would you consider the lowlights, Ty Templeton?
Pretty well everything since 1984. How about that?
Oh, wow. You peaked early.
Yeah, I did. Actually, I don't think I've had any lowlights. I've genuinely enjoyed. I have the best job in the world, quite honestly, because I get to wake up at the crack of noon, and my bosses only care if it's done by the day it's asked for. I don't have clocks. I just have calendars. And most people's jobs require clocks, and mine don't. So if it's due on Friday, they'll get it Friday at 11:59 p.m. That's still Friday, in my opinion. And that way I get to, I don't look at clocks. You'll notice I don't own a watch. Never will.
Okay. So you just, as long as you can just hit send on that email.
Yeah. I honestly, sometimes if it's done at noon, I'll wait till 11:59 so they don't get cocky.
Well, then they're going to be less likely to ask you for changes if you send it in at the last possible moment.
I've been delightfully free of editors who ask for many changes, frankly. I don't know, I guess I'm not screwing up that much, but I don't get asked for changes that much. I did get asked for a bunch of changes once. I'm not going to say the editor's name because my wife is in the audience and she'll know. But I once sent in a script that had 45 dialogue changes for a 17-page script. And I was kind of shocked by that because most of the dialogue changes were arbitrary and stupid. And so I wrote back and I said, well, you can put all the changes in and I'm curious as to who's writing the next issue. Because it will not be me. And I got a note back the next day saying, all right, you don't have to do any of the changes because this person didn't want me to quit. At which point the editor was confused because I was more angry at them for not insisting on any of the changes. Because my attitude was, if you asked for 45 changes and as soon as I complained, you dropped them all, none of them were necessary.
Yeah.
And if you didn't fight, if she fought, if they had fought,
if this person of an unspecified gender,
That's when you assumed her gender.
Yeah, that's true. In today's world, they might be fluid. I don't know. But none of the changes were so important that they were willing to fight for them. So I got even angrier that they gave them all back.
I understand that.
They did not. I said they enough that you didn't hear me when I said she, right? Nobody? No. Oh, I've done it again.
Not at all. Not at all. Well, I thought we'd go through your career at least semi-chronologically.
Okay.
It seems like your first breakthrough book was a book called Stig's Inferno that you did back in the 80s.
Sorry, I was listening to the flipper sounds.
And Glenn was a big fan of that.
I need you to balance something on your nose, Glenn. Yeah, I guess that was my first thing. It was a comic strip that I had done for my school paper when I was in art college. My roommate and I, we went to an art college, and my favorite part about the art college is that we had a newspaper that was 8 pages, 6 pages of which were comic strips. Because it was an art school, and nobody wanted to actually do reporting. So everybody just had a comic strip in the paper, and the first issue came out, and my roommate and I just looked at each other and go, oh, we can do better than these guys. So we conceived of this thing, Stig's Inferno, which was just basically a retelling of Dante's Inferno, with our tongues planted in our cheeks and our fingers up our bums. And the premise of it was just simply the story that was told in Dante's Inferno, which is originally from the 1400s. We just kept it going so that it was now 1984, whenever I was actually doing this. So it was things like Charon the boatman that you have to go over the river Styx. He now has a power boat. And he doesn't want pennies on your eyes, he takes charge cards. And it was just that sort of nonsense going on. And we did it in the school paper, and it was kind of popular. So a couple of years later, when I was working for this small company called Vortex Comics in Toronto, I brought samples of my work to get work from this guy, and after the first story I did with him, he said, "Hey, that's really good. Do you have anything else to do?" And I brought him a couple of issues of the school paper, and he said, "Do you want to make that into a series?" So it was a series like that quickly. I advise you all to do the same thing in your careers. Just bring in something and you'll get a job.
It's just that easy.
Actually, I will tell this story because people every now and then ask me how I really got into the business, because drawing an independent comic book doesn't put you in the comic book industry, that just mostly puts you in the poorhouse. But what happened was I was in the office at Vortex one day, I was about to deliver pages for my next issue, and there's a big fight going on in the main room. There's a little ante-room in the hallway, and there's this big fight in the main room, and after about 10 minutes of this guy comes storming out, who was our editor-in-chief, storms out and goes to the elevator, pushes the button and goes down. And about 3 or 4 minutes later, the publisher comes out and sees me in the hallway and goes, "What are you doing here?" And I'm delivering pages. You want to be editor? And I thought he meant for the afternoon. Because he said, "Come in here, we got a couple of things we got to solve right now." And what happened to Ken? Oh, Ken's gone. So I became editor, and within about 3 hours, I was editor-in-chief. Because we had four titles at the time. We expanded out to 6 while I was there. And for the next year and a half, I was editor-in-chief of this little company. And 2 days into working there, I was on the phone with Steve Ditko about a project he was doing for us, and Bill Sienkiewicz was late with a cover, so I had to call Bill. And I'm sort of looking around going, I guess I'm in the comics industry now. Because at the time, I thought I was a musician.
Really?
That's how I was making my living at the time. I played piano bars.
Oh.
Those things where you have the brandy snifter on your piano and people give you $5.
Right.
Here's the thing that most people should know about playing piano bars. Everyone thinks it's funny to say, "Play Misty for me." Everyone thinks that's funny. And if you learn how to play the song, they owe you $5. So, well, no, because that's what request was.
Right.
So people come and go, "As a piano player, play Misty for me." "Look at me." And now they owe you $5. Piano Man, I got requested almost every day.
I'm sure, yeah.
One More for the Road. There's like about 8 songs that you've got to learn to play in piano bars because you're going to get them every single day.
Right.
But that's what I was doing for a living when I became an editor-in-chief of a small comic book company.
What are the hours on working at a piano bar? You're just there from like 6 until 2 in the morning?
Yeah. It's Canada, so 6 till 1 in the morning.
Oh, okay. All right.
We don't have bars. We have healthcare, so that.
Okay, so you become the editor-in-chief of a comics company, so you have to give up the piano bar.
No, I actually kept doing it. It's just,
I like this, you were keeping your options open.
No, very much. I didn't really stop being an entertainer for about 10 years. There was one period of time when I was an actor and I was playing the lead in a stage show, and I had every night about a 30-minute window where my character went off stage for Act 2. So I had a drawing table set up in the back of the theater, and I figured I could ink a half a page of comics every night. So I was in full gear. I was dressed like a knight, and I was in full gear. The only part I had to take off my sleeves because the chainmail across the page wasn't that great. But I was inking comics dressed as a knight.
What comics were you inking?
Elongated Man. It was the Elongated Man.
Oh, okay. I remember that miniseries.
Yeah, and while I was inking that, every couple of minutes I'd have to run on stage and say "forsooth," and then I would come back off stage and ink stuff. And the sad part was I was getting paid more to ink the comics than I was to do the show. So a part of me was going, I should probably draw more comics.
Yeah.
Because they seem to be giving me a living wage. And the acting was, I think we were getting like $30 a night for the shows. They were pretty bad.
Wow. Well, you're apparently very good at multitasking.
Okay.
But so like after Stig's Inferno, you broke into DC Comics.
No,
You had to set
they
lockpicks.
let me in.
They let you in.
No, actually, no, not after Stig and Inferno, I didn't go to DC Comics, I went to Eclipse Comics.
Okay. What were you did? Was that when you did New Wave?
Yeah.
Okay.
Holy cow, the throng of recognition for that title.
Yeah. I was going to skip over New Wave, but let's talk about New Wave.
Pretty well the industry did. New Wave was a superhero comic at Eclipse. They wanted to kind of compete with the Avengers and the Justice League. So it was me and Lee Weeks, who were both little babies at the time. We were doing this book together. Lee was laying it out and I was doing finished art, and then we do the covers and we'd alternate on the covers. And the series was crap. But the first issue to launch the book so that people would pay attention to it, we were a backup feature in Miracle Man by Alan Moore.
Oh, right.
And that was like this major step into the, again, I kind of slowly easing into the business, but you know, you have a backup. I think we did 2 issues in the back of Alan Moore comics. And that was kind of amazing, because every now and then, I would see, did anybody get the Alan Moore Miracle Man comic where they gave birth?
Yep.
The birth one? I believe I have a backup story in that.
It had a little parental warning on the
Yeah.
cover, like a pack of cigarettes.
Yeah, I think they were equally warning them about New Wave. But
Yes.
that issue at some point was like going for $30, $40, and I like to believe it was because of me and Lee.
Sure. There's no other reason, I'm sure.
There's a baby being born on page 9, but we were down there on page 22 just whacking it.
But there must have been a lot of people in the industry who saw your work.
I guess so.
because of that.
I guess so, because working at Eclipse, am I allowed to tell the story of why I stopped working at Eclipse? Because it's funny. No, I'm asking my wife.
Karen's rolling her eyes.
My wife gets to choose whether I answer these things, because I say things that get me sued all the time. The editor at Eclipse was a guy named Dean Mulaney, and he was married to a woman named Kat Ironwood.
Yes.
Has anyone here ever heard of Kat Ironwood?
Yes.
You don't have to specify all the details.
Okay. Well,
It's too late. We've named names now.
she's not going to sue me, but Kat Ironwood is like 9 versions of crazy. And one day, I had done an interview for, I think, the Comics Journal, and they asked me what it was like working at Eclipse Comics, and I said, it's pretty cool, because they're pretty savvy businessmen, because Eclipse published porn at the time.
Right.
They did these comics called Alien Worlds and Twisted Tales, and they were basically just 5-page stories in which the first 4 pages was women having their clothes ripped off, and the last page was being devoured by monsters, and that was the entire purpose of this comic book.
Those classic tales.
Yeah, and I said in the interview that I thought it was kind of clever marketing, that this company published trash that made them money so they could afford to hire people who were, doing good comics. And Kat found that offensive. I'm not sure why. I think because I called her a pornographer. But so she wrote me this letter, just filled with horrifying invective, just all sorts of vulgar Anglo-Saxon terms for my body parts and things. And so I called the office up and I did that phrase I like to do all the time, which is, that was a fabulous letter, who's doing your next issue, because it won't be me. And I did in fact quit to, not Kat, but to one of the editorial assistants. And the editorial assistant clearly told Kat this, and then Kat wrote me this new letter. By the way, this is back in the days before we had email. And Kat wrote me this letter that I still have. It's one of my favorite pieces of missives I've ever gotten, in which she said, I apologize for calling you an asshole and all those things, because when I wrote that letter originally, I'd never read anything you'd written. And now that I've read what you do, it turns out you're a genius. So I apologize for calling a genius all these names. Wait, here's where it gets good.
Okay.
So at that point, she said, if I can quote this one because I've read this letter about 100 times. If I can forgive John Lennon for abandoning his wife and children and heroin abuse, and I can forgive Bing Crosby for beating his kids, I can forgive you for being mouthy. So what I truly delighted in that was, I don't mind being called an asshole, but now I'm being called a heroin-addicted child beater, which was about 10 times worse than the first letter. And the best part about it was right at the bottom of the letter, it said, under no circumstances may you send a copy of this letter to the Comics Journal.
They would have eaten that up.
Would have, I sent them a copy.
Of course you did.
Anytime somebody says, you will not do this, I rushed to do that. So anybody who's going to send me a threatening letter, don't write on it, don't send it to a publisher, because I will. They didn't run it, but the Journal thanked me for sending them the letter and said, yeah, we all know Cat Argument's crazy. I didn't know that.
That's amazing that they didn't run it. They didn't
What?
consider it newsworthy.
Yeah, it wasn't newsworthy. Because finding out Cat is crazy is like finding out rain is wet. So anyway, so I quit.
So you quit
I quit Eclipse Comics, and I quit on a Friday. And on Monday morning, I got a phone call from Mike Carlin at DC Comics who wanted to know if I wanted to come work for the Superman office.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, what took you so long? I quit Friday. And then I was at DC. I just had to mention that there was that little detour where I worked for Eclipse Comics. I was there for about a year.
Okay.
And it was a pretty fun year, as I said. And mostly I got to work with Lee Weeks, who at the time was just getting started in the business. He wasn't the great Lee Weeks that he is now. And while I was there, I also inked over the first published story by a guy named Eric Larson.
Whatever happened to him?
I think he did well.
Okay.
Yeah, something savage, dragony.
Something with a fin.
Yeah, something with a fin.
Yeah, okay. So you're working for the Superman office, and
Yeah.
you were telling me that was one of your favorite jobs that you've done in your years in comics.
Because the climb up to that was me, putting in, the yeoman service at the time. But when I got to the Superman office, fairly quickly I was working with Kurt Swan. And does anybody here know who Kurt Swan was? Do you remember Kurt Swan? Kurt Swan was the definitive Superman artist for the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so he was still working in the 80s, and I got assigned to be his inker. And I just sat there doing this every morning. And then after John, I got to ink over Jim Mooney for about a year, and I got to ink over Kevin McGuire, and I got to ink over some guy named John Byrne, and I got to ink over some Irv Novick and Jerry Ordway, and just the Superman office. I was
a murderer's row.
It was. I was one of the prime inkers for the Superman office. I didn't leave until they just started gearing up to kill him, so I left just before the money showed up.
You're like, there's going to be royalties soon. I got to get out of here.
Yeah, because the royalties were actually pretty nice. The Death of Superman comics sold like 5.5 million copies.
Yeah.
And the royalties on that bought a lot of my friends' houses, and I had a scooter.
Sure. Well, so you didn't get out empty-handed.
I didn't get out empty-handed. I got some groceries out of it. I honest to God, I left the Superman office about a year before they killed him. It was, if I just hung around, I'd be raining money right now.
If you even had drew one of those issues.
Yeah, they were insane royalty checks on that stuff.
Wow.
But to be fair, the royalty checks in the 90s were actually pretty good. When I started off doing Batman Adventures, the royalty checks on those were pretty nice. So I didn't completely escape the royalty.
Yeah, I mean, because the Death of Superman, it just had the virtue of happening on a slow news day, so it became this huge story.
Yeah.
And
But
the mainstream press picked
But
it
it
up.
still sold millions of copies for DC.
Yeah.
I think to this day it's the best-selling copy of a floppy. The best-selling comic of all time is still Watchmen, but the best-selling floppy of all time, I think, is Superman 75.
I can believe it. I can believe it. So after that, you moved on to Batman Adventures, and you were telling me yesterday that you came very close to working on the show itself. They were
Well, I worked on the show.
Okay.
I just didn't do anything.
Oh, that's right. You were paid.
I got paid.
You were paid, but you didn't do anything.
I spent a lot of my career getting paid for doing nothing. It's kind of fun. I was hired as a storyboard artist for the Batman Adventures series because I animated a bunch of commercials for Zellers featuring Batman.
Which is a Canadian toy store.
It's a Canadian department store.
Department store.
But the commercials, there were 4 of them. If you're in Canada, you saw them enough to be annoyed. But it's Batman and Robin stopping toy prices from becoming criminally high or something idiotic like that.
If you haven't seen these commercials, they're on YouTube.
They're on YouTube, and if you want to YouTube the commercials, you'll get to see the voice actor that is standing in front of you play Robin. I was Robin in the commercials too.
Oh, very nice.
And the commercials ended up getting Warner Brothers' interest in making an animated Batman TV series, and they actually used them as part of the pitch. And when they found out that one of the guys working at DC made those commercials, they hired me to be a storyboard artist for the Batman animated series. But they never sent me any scripts to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And so for 3 weeks, I sat in an office drawing a paycheck, but not drawing pictures. And at the end of 3 weeks, they said, "We're tired of paying you and not doing anything. Please come over here to this section of the building and start drawing the Tasmanian Devil show." And I went, "Nah, I quit."
So it was Batman or nothing.
It was Batman or nothing. I didn't want to work on the Tasmanian Devil show. So my team did. They all went off and made a living because they're not precocious little bastard like I am. And a couple of months later, I got a phone call from the DC offices and said that they wanted me to do the Batman Adventures television show, specifically because I was an animator for the series. And I was smart enough not to tell them I wasn't. But they saw my name on something. Well, Ty worked on one of the, he was part of the
He knows
Canadian
how to
team.
draw these characters.
For God's sake. So when they asked me to do the Batman Adventures comic book, I had the series Bible, which most artists don't get.
Right.
And so when I was able to match the models that hit it bang on, everybody was thrilled with me, because up until then, whenever they adapted cartoons to a comic book, nobody ever bothered to hit the models.
Yeah, they got sort of close, maybe.
Yeah. But because I'd actually practiced and trained with those models, I got really good at them, and that's why I got the job. I will tell you this, when I was first offered Batman Adventures, I turned it down.
But why is that?
Because I was doing a series with Stan Lee called Ravage 2099.
Sure. You want to hitch your wagon to that stuff.
Yeah, you do. I got at least one laughter from that. You clearly read a Ravage 2099.
Yeah, oh yes.
Weren't they terrible?
Wonderful.
No, they were awful. And it was Stan Lee's last big project at Marvel. And I consider myself incredibly fortunate that I'd been tagged to do this thing. And I was sitting in Scott Peterson's office at DC Comics when he was trying to convince me. I kept going, no, I got to stick with Stan Lee because I'm going to be working with Stan Lee. This is a great thing.
Right.
And as I was doing this, I was in the DC offices with a friend of mine, and she punched me in the arm as hard as she could. Just as hard as she possibly could. And then I went, why'd you do that? She went, it's Batman. And so I quit the Stan Lee job.
Good.
Yeah. And then Ravage, I think Ravage lasted 8 issues and then was canceled. And then Batman Adventures is still going 25 years later. So I clearly hit the right start for once.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Wasn't the Batman Adventures originally supposed to just be a 3-issue series?
It was. And then we launched the first issue and we sold 300,000 copies.
Wow.
At which point, as soon as the sales came in, they went, we're doing this ongoing. And because I'd only committed to 3, I'd already promised Andy Helfer I was going to start drawing the Justice League after I finished it. So I had a job. I had to go off somewhere else.
Right.
And they spent about a year or 2 asking me to come back over and over and over again. And eventually, when they asked me back, I said, I kind of don't want to draw it. I want to write it. And they let me.
That's great. And you did a great job writing.
Thank you, but that surprised me, because normally when you're pigeonholed as being one thing, when you're pigeonholed as being an artist, they don't tend to support you when you sort of go, oh no, I don't want to do the thing you want me to do, I want to do a different thing. But Scott Peterson, who was my editor at Batman, was an unbelievably supportive, very wonderful dude. I am actually working with Scott Peterson right now on a project. We're doing something together. So it obviously formed a relationship that we're still doing 25 years later.
Yeah, and you actually returned to Batman just
3 or 4 times.
Just recently you did a prequel comic for the Batman Harley Quinn.
Yeah, last year, my wife and I did a Harley Quinn graphic novel that was tied into the most recent Harley Quinn movie. Yeah.
And that's fun. You like the chemistry among the creative team is still there.
Well, it's very easy to have chemistry with your wife.
Well, yes. I was talking about broader picture.
Oh, right.
I was thinking your chemistry with Kieran is a given. That's okay.
No, because they also got Rick Burchett come back and pencil it, and Rick was the penciler for the last year or so. I was working on Batman Adventures, and I very specifically requested him to come back. It was like that, we're getting the old gang back together thing.
Yeah.
I have a kind of standing belief that anytime DC wants me to work on Batman, I say yes.
That seems like a good policy.
Yeah, in fact, I probably can't mention it, but I just did a little cute Batman thing about a week and a half ago with Harley in it, but that's all I'm saying.
Okay. All right, we won't press you for more information.
No,
we want to.
No, you'll see it all, it'll come out and it'll be gorgeous, but it's...
toys.
You can talk about
Oh, I can talk about the
Yeah.
toys.
I'm
also designing a set of toys for the Batman Adventures line of characters that never appeared in the cartoon or the comic, but who are really popular Batman characters, so they ended up getting me to redesign them as Batman Adventures toys. So the line at the moment includes the Batman Who Laughs, the Flashpoint Batman, the Vampire Batman, help me out.
Red Rain?
The Red Rain Batman, Deadshot.
Who you did in the Batman Adventures comic, or the Gotham Adventures?
Oh, sorry, no, Deathstroke. Deathstrike.
Oh, okay.
Deathstrike. Deathstroke?
Deathstroke.
Yes.
The Teen Titans villain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody did, somebody had a stroke, and I drew the card. And a couple more that I'm forgetting, but they're all coming out next year.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing that.
Again, it's one of those things that every now and then my children look at me and go, "You're now officially cool because you designed a toy." Because, it doesn't matter what I've done for the last 35 years, I'm only cool when I do something they are appealing to.
Now, I understand with Batman Adventures, you weren't allowed to write and draw the same story, is
No.
that right? Because of some sort of law with you?
Yes, because I'm a Canadian citizen.
Okay.
And amusingly enough, if you are not an American citizen, the copyright laws, according to the editors at DC, are such that you cannot write and draw the book outside the country and then import it and have them become the official authors of it. So to be the writer-artist on a book, you have to be incorporated, and you have to have some kind of silly legal nonsense. I got incorporated this year, so I can do it now. But for years, I hadn't been. So I had to, when Dan and I did the series together, the reason we had a second writer on the series was so Dan could write every second story so I could draw it. So I would write the first story, and it would be drawn by Rick Burchett, and then Dan would write a story for me to draw, and we just kept trading off like that, specifically so I could be writing and drawing the book. It was such a convoluted and weird thing to do, but it got Dan work, which is nice.
If you wrote the story in Canada, then came down to the U.S. and drew it in the U.S.,
I'd need a green card.
Okay.
There's actually stupid laws about this, because I'm not a Canadian citizen.
Because you are a Canadian.
I am a Canadian citizen.
Because you're not a U.S. citizen.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
But there was some legal nonsense about this. And then the funniest part about all that was, while they were telling me I couldn't write and draw the same story, I was writing and drawing the same story for Marvel and Simpsons all the time.
Well, why was it okay for Marvel and Bongo, but not DC?
My only theory is because Warner Brothers is a larger corporation, at least it was at the time, and they had more lawyers.
So maybe these days with Disney owning Marvel, that wouldn't be...
Yeah, but again, I incorporated that's not going to be a problem. But I would actually bring this up with my Marvel editors and go, I'm not supposed to be writing and drawing the same story, right? And they go, we don't care. So when I got to do Dark Claw, I got to write and draw Dark Claw because that was technically a Marvel comic book.
Right.
And so Marvel didn't care.
Dark Claw was the mashup between Batman and Wolverine that they did. Amalgam.
The amalgam, yeah. I've never understood why all the other corporations didn't care, but Warner Brothers did. And they still do to this day, because I was asking about it when we did the graphic novel, if I could draw it, and they said no. And that was last year.
But you're incorporated now.
I wasn't incorporated last year.
Oh, okay. But now you can do it.
I've done it because I'm sick and tired of not being allowed to write and draw my own story.
I can see, yeah, that would get irritating.
Yeah.
You mentioned to me, one of your favorite stories that you've done for DC was a story that you did in the book Wasteland, which was co-written by John Ostrander.
John Ostrander and Del Close.
And Del Close. Del Close, if you don't know, he's a big improv guru. He started the Second City, and he trained a lot of comedians, half the people on Saturday Night Live were trained by Del Close.
He's also a skull.
Yes.
You know about that?
Yeah, he boiled away his flesh so he could be the skull in Hamlet.
So you could be the skull in Hamlet.
After he died.
It is apocryphal, but I tell the story anyway. No, he did boil away his thing, and it's in a display case somewhere, but they never bring it on stage.
They legally couldn't do it.
I have
some liability thing, or
I have something like that.
Yeah.
There's a story in the first issue of Wasteland which starts with a guy waking up in the sewers, naked but for an acetylene torch strapped to his head, on roller skates, skating through the sewers, shooting rats. And
that old story.
Right, but that's the first page, and at the bottom of the page it says, "God damn it, I hate waking up in the sewers. Chapter 1 of my autobiography by Del Close." And when I read that, I immediately fell in love with Del, because how could you not? So the first thing I said to Del when I met him was, "Is that a true story? Did you really wake up in the sewers naked with an acetylene torch strapped to your head shooting at rats?" And he looks at me and he goes, "It was a miner's helmet." So he apparently elaborated on the truth.
Yes, okay.
Del was one of my heroes and one of the most delightful people on the planet Earth, and I wish I'd gotten to know him better than I did.
Yeah. Did you ever get to work with him as an actor?
No.
No? Okay. But John Ostrander was also an actor.
Yes.
As well. So, tell me about the story that you did for Wasteland.
It's
dissecting
Mr. Fleming. It's a weird little story about House of Mystery or spooky horror stories are always about characters that do some kind of immoral thing, and in the end the karma punishes them with being hit by a car or whatever. The idea that John and Del had for this story was, let's start the story there. Let's start the story on page 1. of the characters already being horrifyingly destroyed.
Okay.
So it's a story about a guy who goes to high school one day and he has to dissect a frog and he doesn't want to, and he tells his dad about how uncomfortable this is. So dad goes to the school and murders and dissects his teacher. And as
you do.
As you do. And rather than that being the story, that was page 1. So page 1 starts with this 12-year-old kid looking at his dad covered in blood and his teacher's body parts all over the gymnasium.
Right.
And the dad's going, "I did it for you, boy!" And that's page 1. So it was like an 8-page story of just them mopping up blood. I'm absolutely dead serious.